Hey, welcome to Lesson 5 of the C# Learning tutorial here. In this lesson we're going to talk about arrays. What is an array? An array is just like any other variable that we've been dealing with, except that it can store more than one value of the same type. Right now all we've really done is create variables that store a single type, for example like boolean, integer, string, etc. Arrays can store two or more types in the same variable and can later be accessed by their location in the array by an index or a number. The way arrays are laid out is you can imagine an array almost like a spreadsheet that has rows and columns. A single dimensional array, which will be the first one we talk about, has one row and multiple columns. Let me show, let's bring up a spreadsheet program so maybe we can get a better idea of what I'm actually talking about and give you a better visual layout there. So here's a basic single dimensional array that has nine elements to it. Now all arrays are zero index based, meaning that the first slot of the array starts at 0 and not 1. So the max index or the max location for the actual array will be the size minus 1 since we do start at 0. So since this array here has 9 elements, therefore this particular slot here would be location or index value of 8. And this array here, if we were to create this, this would be a string type array that holds multiple string variables. And this one here we have welcome or hello, welcome to C# programming, comma, hope you enjoy. All that is stored within the single array itself. So how are arrays declared? Arrays are declared just like any other variable with an exception of a few additional requirements to make them array. Here's an example. And what we have here is we have our type, which is string, and then we have the square brackets here which says, hey, I want a string type array, and then we have our name of our array, and then we have the equals new string square bracket 25 square bracket. Now what this is actually doing here is it's saying, hey, I want a string array, and I need to set aside some memory for it. So the new string is telling the compiler to say, hey, I need some memory space for this, and the 25 here is saying how many elements do I want in my array initially, so how much memory am I going to set aside for this particular array, and in this case here we want to make it 25 elements. So how do we access array elements? You access array elements with their index or what position they're in. Remember, arrays start with 0 and not 1. So you access arrays like this particular string here, this line of code we have here is we have the array name, and then we have a method called getValue, and then it accepts a parameter of index, or what location do I want to access. You use the get method to retrieve the value from the array at the given position, and you use setValue to assign a value to that given position there. So let's take a look at this, how it all looks in our code. So let's go ahead and fire up our Visual Studio and type some code out and see what we can come up with. Alright, now that we have Visual Studio opened up here, let's do some typing and let's create a simple string array. So we're going to go string square bracket my string array equals a new string square bracket. How many elements do we want here? Let's give it 9. Let's give it like our example we had there in the PowerPoint. Pretty straightforward there. Like I said before, string, and you want the square brackets tell it, hey, I want a string array. You name it, and you use the new string to say, I'm going to set aside some memory here for this, and then how many elements do we actually want, and how much actual memory are we actually going to need for this array. So let's go ahead and put some information into our particular array here. And like I said, we use the setValue method, so we'll do my string array dot setValue, and we have the setValue takes a couple parameters. It takes the value, whatever you want it to be, and it's of type object, which means it can pretty much be anything. But in our case here, we're going to be using string. And then the second parameter is the index. Where do we actually want to store this? So we'll do, like in our example, hello, and we'll put him at position 0. And we'll just do this. We'll continue doing this this right here for all the 9 elements and create that sentence that we had in our slideshow there. Okay, now that we have our array declared, instantiated, and populated with some data by using the hard-coded method here, and as you can see, it is time-consuming to populate arrays like this, but this is strictly for demonstration purposes only. In the real world, you probably wouldn't populate an array by hard-coding all the values into it, but except for this demonstration, that's how we're going to do it there. So now that we have the array populated, let's go ahead and write out the information to the console as we've done before with the console.writeLine method. And the first one we're going to do, we're just going to just grab the first element just to demonstrate how it all works there. So we'll do console.writeLine myStringArray.getValue this time. And now the only parameter that we're worried about is the location. Which location of the array do we want to display? In this case, we'll just pick 0. And once we have that, then we'll do the console.readLine so we can pause the screen there so we can see our output. And then we'll just go ahead and F5, we'll run it. And as you can see, we get hello there, results as to be expected. So now, you could go through and you could type all this, in each a line out for each element there to display it out to the screen. But again, that's time-consuming, and it's not very efficient. So in this case here, we could use a loop to display everything to the screen, one line at a time. And so let's go ahead and use a simple for loop like we've learned before. So we'll do for int x equals 0, x is less than or equal to myStringArray dot length, the length of the array, and we want to do -1, and then we'll do x plus plus, and then we'll do console.writeLine myStringArray.getValue, and this, for the parameter here, we're going to use x. X is going to be our incrementing number, and it's one we're going to use to as for the index for the array itself. So let's run this and see what we get. And we get hello, welcome to C# programming, hope you enjoy. That 3 lines of code, and we've displayed the entire array contents there. And you can use any type of loop with this particular setup here. I chose the for loop, easy to use. Easy to use, easy to understand. And once we could use I remember we talked about using the foreach loop. And we'll at the end of after we all get finished with arrays here, then we'll step into that foreach loop to also see how we can access the arrays with a simple foreach loop there. Okay, let me just go back here and touch on something. This line here might be a little bit confusing. The length -1. The length is how many elements are in the array, and the -1 is saying before, like I said, we have 9 elements, but we only have 0 to 8 index locations. So if we didn't use the -1, x would eventually get up to the number 9, and then it would try to access an index that the array doesn't have. Let's just remove the -1 here and run the program, and we'll see what actually occurs if we don't do that. As you can see, we get an index out of range exception, and what it's saying here is because x right now is of value 9, and the index 9 does not exist in the array since it starts at 0. If it started at 1, 9 would exist, but since it starts at 0, 9 doesn't exist. So that's why we do, if x is less than or equal to, the array length, which is 9, -1, which would be 8, and that would give us the eighth position of our array here, without going out of bounds through the next iteration of the for loop. Alright. So now you've seen how we can set value into the array by hard-coded method. You've seen how we can get the values from an array by using a loop. Let's create another type of array, and let's set some values into that array with a loop based off of the values in our string array. So let's create a Boolean type array, and we'll just call it my bool array. Doesn't matter, you can call it whatever you want. Equals new Boolean. We'll also give it nine elements. And what we're going to do here is we're going to loop through this array, and we're going to look at it. And we'll look at the values that are in each location, and we're going to take a look at the length of the characters there. And if the length of the characters is greater than a value we put in there, we want to put in true or false into the corresponding location in the Boolean array. So first of all, let's create our first for loop to walk through the string array. X equals 0, x less than or equal to the my string array dot length minus 1, x plus plus. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll do an if statement. If the my string array dot get value in the current location that we're at, and even though it is a string, to look at the contents of this location and to get access to the string methods we need to convert it into a string again. I know it kind of sounds redundant, but the get value itself returns, of type. As you can see, it returns type object, and we need to actually convert that object into a string to get access to some of the string methods and properties. So just do a simple toString, opening and closing parenthesis, and then put another period. And in here we have access now to all the string type classes and methods and properties that we want to use here. And the one that we're going to be interested in is the length of that particular string. So if the length of the characters is greater than, let's say, 5, what we'll do at that point is we'll say, okay, the my bool array dot set value, and we're going to say true, and we're going to put him at location x. So if we're at location 0 in the my string array, and that has more than 5 characters, the corresponding location, the Boolean array, we want to set that to true or false. And then if it's not, we'll do else. And here we'll just copy this particular line here, and we'll change true to false. Okay, so what we got here is we're looping through the string array. We're taking a look at the actual elements and how many characters are actually there. If there's more than 5 characters, we're going to say true. We're going to put the value true into the Boolean array at the same position or index of the string array. So like I said before, if 0 has more than 5, position 0 in the Boolean array will have true or false. And if it's not, we'll do the false there. So now let's go ahead and we want to display the Boolean array results after we're done. So we'll do another simple for loop. Now in here, well, we can't use x. Like I like to use x a lot. We can use anything. I mean, I like to use simple stuff like that, but we'll just call this one index. Index less than or equal to the my bool array dot length minus 1 index plus plus. And index is probably a little easier to understand since we're using it as the index of the actual array itself. So then we'll do console.writeLine my bool array dot get value, and we'll just use index. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our program here. Oops, forgot a closing parenthesis here. Okay, so we have false, true, false, false, true, false, false, false. So it looks like here we only had 2 elements that had more than more than 5 characters, and that would be welcome and programming. And those and everything lines up accordingly. 0, 1, true. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's just another way, you can populate arrays using loops as well. And these demonstrations here probably aren't super practical in the real world, but they give you the foundation of how you can use arrays and how you can populate and display their data with a simple for loop there. All right, back to our PowerPoint here. As we also just demonstrated there, arrays can be of any type. Type meaning, string, int, char, byte, double, boolean, the one we just used there. You can even create arrays with your own types, and we'll get into our own types later on when we get into classes. So just remember that an array type, any array type is pretty much valid. So now let's move on to multi-dimensional arrays. Arrays don't just have to be one row and multiple columns. You can have many rows and many columns. This is what's called a multi-dimensional array. Let's take a look at that spreadsheet program again. We'll help you visualize what a multi-dimensional array looks like. Okay, so multi-dimensional array, you have your columns here, then you also have multiple rows, and the way these are accessed is similar to what we've done before with an index, except only instead of just having one index, you'll have one for the column, and then you'll have what index for the row, and then wherever those two meet is the value that you're going to grab. And I'm sure most everybody's familiar with how that cross section there and works and everything. So declaring multi-dimensional arrays, pretty much the same way as a single-dimensional array. Just a few other things that are added in here. And so again, we still have our string in our square bracket. We have the name, and we still got to say, hey, I want a new string array. Except the only thing this time is in the first part we put a comma there, and the comma is saying, this I want a multi-dimensional array of this particular example here, saying I want 2 dimensions. So with the commas there, you always put one less comma than how many dimensions you actually want. So if you have 2, you have 1 comma. If you can think about it as this way, as you can see here, we got 5, 8. That gives us our 2 dimensions. Well, here it's just you have the comma separating the 2 dimensions. There's just actually no numbers there. And then again, we have the rows and columns here. It's just a little bit different. It's not terribly complex. So let's go ahead and get back into our Visual Studio, and we'll declare a couple multi-dimensional arrays and see how they work with a for loop and accessing and getting data out of them as well. Alright, now that we're back into our Visual Studio here, let's go ahead and declare a multi-dimensional array. In this case here, we're just working with 2-dimensional arrays. We're not working with 3-dimensional arrays. 3-dimensional arrays, anything more than 2 dimensions can get complicated in a hurry, and it's hard to envision a 3-dimensional array. But basically, if you have ever played 3D tic-tac-toe, where you have the 3 tic-tac-toe boards stacked up on top of each other, that would be a 3-dimensional array, and you have your x and y on each level, and then the levels is another dimension there. So you'd still have your indexes, and then your third index would be which level am I going to. And you can give 4, 5, 6, 7 dimensional arrays, but when you get arrays to be that deep and that big and complex, generally 99% of the time there is a better way to store the data that you're working with. I don't use arrays bigger than 2 dimensions. If a need comes up that I need an array that's bigger than 2 dimensions, I'll seek out another way or another method to store the data or whatever it is that I'm particularly working with there, whether it be a database or making excuse me, making classes with different properties and structs or anything like that. So just keep that in mind, that arrays can be big and complex, and try to stay away from, you know, complex arrays, because usually there is a better way to solve your problem than going that route. But let's get back to two-dimensional arrays here. Let's go ahead and create one. We'll make another string array, and square bracket, comma, square bracket, my multi-array, new string, and we'll just give it 5 columns and 8 rows. Okay. Just like in the example there we showed in the PowerPoint there. Alright, now let's go ahead and set a value to this this array here, just show you, demonstrate you how we do that there. Similar to the single dimension array, let's do the my multi-array dot set value, and this time we're going to be using a different method of the or a different version of the set value method here. If you scroll down through them, you'll come to one that says value index 1 index 2, and that's the one that we're going to be using, because we need to specify where exactly we're going to be as far as what row and what column. So in this case here, let's just do something simple. Let's just type out hello, and we'll put him in 4, 2. And then we can display that as we've done before, using the get value method. And again, we'll be, if you scroll down through them, we'll get to the one that has, you know, 2 indexes there. And so we'll go ahead and just display 4, 2. And we'll run that, and we get hello. Now, if we want to loop through a multi-dimensional array, it's a little different. You can't just use length anymore, because now the length is 40, and we obviously don't have that many particular locations. So we have to use a couple different methods called get upper bound, and that's get the element, the max element, from what dimension are we talking about, and I'll demonstrate that here. So and we're going to need, since we have 2 dimensions, we'll need 2 loops. So we'll start with the first loop here. Let's do for int x equals 0, x is less than or equal to the my multi-array dot. Now here's where we can't use length, because the length is, like I said, is going to be 40, and that would be out of bounds. You would get that exception, and odd things would happen. So here's where we got to do get upper bound, and it wants what dimension do you want? Well, we only have 2, so we're going to do the first one, the first dimension, which is at index 0 there. Get upper bound, and here we don't need to use the -1. And then we'll just do x plus plus. That'll take care of the outside loop there. Now let's do the inside one. Let's call this one index equals 0, and then do index less than or equal to my multi dot get upper bound. This time we want to use the other dimension, so we'll use 1. Index plus plus. So what we got here is this one here, this outer loop, will take care of the first dimension, and then the inner loop will take care of the second dimension. So what's going to happen here is x will start out at 0, then it'll come here, and this one will continue looping through all of these elements here. So we'll get 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, etc. Once it's done, it'll go back up here. X will change to 1. Then we'll get 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, so on and so forth. So what we'll do here now is just do my multi-array dot set value, and we'll just use let's just use x as the value we're going to put in there, and convert it, and then cast it over to a string there, or not cast, it's not really a cast, but let's just convert it to a string by using the toString method. And then we'll the first index we're going to use will be x, and then the second one will be index. Okay, let's just let's put a breakpoint here in the console.read line. Let's run our program, see what we get. Okay, nothing's going to show on the screen, so we're not displaying anything. It's going to pause the program so we can get access to some of the stuff in here. So if we mouse over my multi-array, you'll see that it says there my multi-array, it's a string 5, 8 there. And if we click the plus sign, now you'll see each element here and its corresponding value. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all zeros because we are using x, and x is still 0. Every time the outer loop iterates, it goes, changes that value. So the value is actually the outer loop's value and its corresponding coordinate there. Okay. Now let's go ahead and hit F5 just to continue the program. And where is the... there we go. Alright, obviously nothing on the screen. Press enter to end the program. Now we can go ahead and use a loop to display that as well. It's going to be very similar to what we just did, except using set value we'll use get value. So we'll just go ahead and copy this. And we'll change this to get value, and we don't need that first parameter there. And let's run that. Oh, oops. Forgot to do cancel.writeLine. Getting ahead of myself. Alright. There we go. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. What we're displaying there is we're only displaying the value from this particular, that location there, which is what we saw before. Run that again and we'll pause it. So here are the values. We've got 0, 0, 0, shove it 7 times or 8 times, so on and so forth. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's not I wouldn't call it hard. It's different, and like I said, if you were doing this with more than 2 dimensions, you can probably see how quickly things can get complex. Like I said, I don't use many arrays that are more than 2 dimensions because I feel there are better ways to store and access data. 2-dimensional arrays, no problem, easy to use, easy to walk through, easy to step through, easy to get and set values to. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the multi-dimensional array. I encourage you to play around with it a bit, get used to it. You may, there will be a time that comes up that you do have to use them. Probably not very much. You'll use, single-dimensional arrays far more than you'll use a multi-dimensional array. But yes, play around with them. Play around with arrays altogether, and the more comfortable you are with them, the easier they'll become to understand. Okay, now we're going to talk about the foreach loop. The foreach loop is a loop that uses types to iterate through a collection of data. What does that mean, you might ask? Well, let's say you have an array of type integer, which we have created, and you can use the foreach loop to walk through and display the values of that particular array without using its index location like we've used in the past, using that the get value and then the index and displaying that to the screen. Let's go back to our Visual Studio and we'll see how that all works together. So first of all, we're going to need an array of some type. Let's use the example. Let's create an integer array and call it my int data collection equals new int, and we'll give it 9 elements there. And then let's populate it real quick with a simple for loop here. This is less than or equal to length. And I'm just going to use the value of x for the value I'm going to store in there. Okay, so this we've seen before here. We just went through all that, so we all are familiar with what's going on there. Now the for each loop how that's created here is you do for each. Then we need to create a variable of the type that we're going to be looking for. So in this case, we're going to be looking for integers. So we'll do int. I'll just call it my int. Then we'll do in my int data collection. So what that's saying is that for each integer type in my data collection, loop through it. So instead of using the, for x is, less than or equal to this, length minus 1, we're not going to base it off of an index like this. We're just going to base it off of all the types. Is every time, keep going until there are no more types that you can find. So then let's go ahead and display that to the screen. We'll console.writeLine. And then here, instead of doing my int data collection dot get value, well, that value is already stored into this integer variable that we created here. So all we have to do is do my int toString. It doesn't really need to be toString. That's just a habit for me to do that there, so you can do it however you want. I just make it a toString. The WriteLine method I think does convert it to a string no matter what, but I just do it out of habit. Okay, so we have our array here, our data collection, and then we have our loop here to populate it with something, and then we have our for each loop here that's going to step through the array one element at a time based on the types that's in it. So let's just run this and see what we get. And as you can see, we get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how many, there's 9 elements. They're all populated based off of this here. And this, the for each loop, like I said, walks through it with the given type and then displays the data. Now if you change that to like string, it'll give us an error message. And the error message we get here is cannot convert type int to string, because it knows that this data collection here is of type integer and not string. So whatever the data type is, that'll be the type, the element type, or the variable type that you have to use to walk through it. And you can do this with anything. You can do it with Boolean. You can do it, like, again, with your own created type. So say you had a data collection of cars. You could say, for each car in my car data collection, walk through this and do something with that. Let's say let's use the example of cars again there. Say for each car, if this particular car here has 4 doors, if you're looking at it that way, do something based on that it has 4 doors. If it doesn't have 4 doors, it only has 2, do something else. And all we're doing is using, looking for the types in that particular data collection. The for each loop isn't hard at all. It's just before I didn't want to show it because it's difficult to show the for each loop without knowing about arrays first, because arrays are hold types, and that's how the for each loop works, is using types to iterate through it there. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, I encourage you to play around with all this stuff that we've talked about. By no means is what I'm showing you the end of it. That isn't. There's way more to all this stuff than what I'm showing you. This just gives you a kind of a firm grasp of the foundation, and you can certainly build off of that there. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to message me or leave a comment or anything like that. So again, hopefully all this makes sense, and it doesn't, it's not too confusing and whatnot. So let's go back to the slideshow and let's see what lesson 6 is going to bring us. So what's to come in lesson 6? We're going to talk about data structures, creating them and using them, grouping data with these data structures. Data structures are kind of neat, and it should be an exciting lesson. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've watched here today, and hope to see you in lesson 6.